Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We hope you're enjoying the ACT Tech Summit today and that you so far have gathered some valuable information from the discussions and the presentations that we've had. Up next is our panel discussion on mining your agency's data. As a reminder, or for those of you who were not able to be with us for our prior sessions, I am Ginny Winkworth, Program Manager for ACT. And I want to just remind everyone that all attendees are muted, but we do welcome your questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit those questions. We do have some time that we've set aside at the end of the panel discussion to answer those. So please join us at the end of the session. Our panelists will be happy to answer any questions that you've input during the session or any questions that you'd like to ask actually during that Q&A portion. So now I'd just like to turn it over to Ron Berg, ACT's Executive Director, who will do a few introductions and lead our discussion.
Thanks, Ginny. So as Ginny alluded to, we've got a great session coming up. We've got a panel of 3 industry tech providers who are going to dive into how agents can access and make sense of the valuable data in their systems. We'll discuss how this data can be used for higher revenues, via increased sales and greatly improved service. So it's going to be a great session. But before we get into it, let's meet our panelists. We'll start with Bruce Dickhoff, President and CEO of North American Software Associates, or NASA. They're based in Sauk Center, Minnesota, right next to my hometown. Bruce, thanks so much for joining us today. Could you take just a minute to share a bit about yourself, your role at NASA, and your background, please?
Sure. I've been with NASA for, well, next month it'll be 35 years. So I've kind of had a chance to play a role in just about every part of the company, from training customers, customer support, programming. That's where my background came from. And now to my current role, where I'm the president and CEO of the company. So I kind of oversee the day-to-day running of the company, but still get my hand in on the development side of things because I still have an interest in that. So that's kind of where my background comes from.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for being here. So next, we'll turn to Aaron Larson, the founder and CRO of DAIS Technologies. He's based in Des Moines. Aaron, welcome. Would you please share, as Bruce did, a bit about yourself, your current role, and other background?
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm one of the founders of DAIS. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, and we focus on making it easier for agencies and carriers to buy and sell insurance. We're a technology platform. We're about 5 years old, and my background is spent about half my career on the personal line side, half on the commercial side. I'm an insurance geek, I guess, with analytics and operational background, but really passionate about the agency space and trying to bring tools to help it be more successful.
Perfect. So our third panelist is Dan Goodwin. Dan is the Director of Carrier and Industry Technology Integration for AgencyKPI. And though AgencyKPI is based in Austin, Texas, Dan is based in Johnston, Iowa, also near Des Moines. And he's got a wide background within our industry. Dan, thanks for being with us. As Aaron and Bruce did, could you just take a couple minutes to share with us about your role and your background?
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. And thank you for including me on this discussion today. Dan Goodwin, I've been in the industry now for, it's got to be almost 25 years now. 20 years it was spent at Nationwide. I grew up through the carrier kind of side of things before I actually moved over into the technology provider space. I've been with AgencyKPI since the beginning and really have been focusing most of my efforts on integration with carriers and industry partners, if you will, from a technology perspective. A lot of it continuing to leverage the networking and relationships I built in my time as a carrier, now on the other side representing the technology space and the agency. So I'm excited about being here. Thank you.
Awesome. So you can see those who are attending today that we've got 3 representatives that are not only well qualified for this discussion, but it just totally fits what we're going to be talking about. So let's get into our session. I think that perhaps many of the agents listening to the discussion today aren't completely clear on understanding the opportunities around using the power of data within their workflows. So I'd like to start by asking, what are some examples of how agents can really leverage their data? Aaron, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. From our standpoint, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity locked within data, and we try to help both agencies and carriers to extract that value. The three ways that I see really a quick benefit is to help agencies and carriers to create targeted experiences, persona-driven customer experiences, and really dominate the niches that they're in. I worked, at a commercial carrier for about 8 years, and expertise was everything. And to the extent that you can use data to further your expertise, that's a powerful differentiator. The second thing that we see is using policy data to automate cross-sell and upsell during the renewal cycle, and interventions and coverage prompts kind of throughout the life cycle and different experiences during that time period to initiate those. And then the last piece is using lead data more proactively and kind of taking rate off the table by being able to automate that as part of the reach out and being able to remove that potential objection up front and have better price transparency.
Okay. Perfect. So that's a pretty wide spectrum that you've set there. Bruce, I'll turn to you from your management system platform background. Similar thoughts, slightly differing?
Yeah, coming from the management system background, we know the amount of data that the agencies have in the system, whether it be through download, whether it be through manual entry of the system or coming in from third-party systems, that large amount of data. And it's important that they understand that they have that there. And of course, us, like most management systems, we provide a lot of reporting capabilities. We provide prompts when, that they can set when certain things happen, when they hit certain thresholds. Maybe it be cancellations, maybe it be on renewals or things that have gone past renewal, things that have non-renewed. So for retention purposes, they have that data that they can use to keep an eye on that. And of course, the simplistic thing of just supporting their customers. Having all that data in this system allows them to have it right at their fingertips. So if they are dealing with one of their clients on the phone, face-to-face, however it may be, they can access all that data that's there and have that in front of them so they can make sure they're giving them the answers they need. And of course, they can be watching when they're talking to them to do that cross-selling. If they happen to notice that they only have certain lines of business with them, they don't have others. It prompts them with a chance to talk to them about other opportunities they may have for them.
And I think that gets brought up a lot, Bruce, but the point is that you bring up is valid, that there may not be as many defined processes within agencies around that there maybe could be to take advantage of the power of that data.
Correct.
So Dan, from your a hybrid background, if you would, sorry if I'm throwing that at you out of the blue, but you've got carrier or insurance company background as well as now technology provider background. What's your lens on that subject?
Well, I think for me, I think there's so much data available. There's so much out there, right? And there's so much, but what do you do with it? And so I think that where I sit today is kind of a middle person, right? Arguably, none of it's my data, right? And so we're a technology or a data provider, a business intelligence provider that helps bring the data together between the carrier, the agencies, the networks, the wholesalers, whatever. We bring it in to do what? To tell a story. And I think the reality is data is data, but what is the data trying to tell you? And I think that as I look at definitely with Bruce and Aaron, it's the same deal, right? We have a lot of information. We're trying to bring it so that we can help the agent tell a story and help the agents and really carriers or whoever is actually trying to utilize the information to really try to figure out what is it they're trying to, what's the business problem they're trying to solve, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. If you're just going to grab data and open it and say, what's it going to tell me and how do I take action on it? I think what you first need to do is take a step back and say, what is the problem I'm trying to accomplish? What is it I want to do? I want to grow. Do I want to be more profitable? Do I have an opportunity in a market that I'm not currently capturing? That's the business problem. And then you use the data to help define that.
And I think that's a great summary, Dan. Thank you for that. I've heard each of you Bruce, Aaron, and Dan talking about that as the overriding lens that you need to use. What are the problems that the agency is trying to solve for? So that sets a great base understanding. So let's dive a little bit more deeply and discuss the how agencies can create a more dedicated strategic roadmap on maybe one, using the data they already have access to. We talked about that. And two, accessing more of the powerful data they could be using. Bruce, I'll turn back to you again as the visionary behind the management system platform, NASA. Let's start with your thoughts on this, please.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been brought up, you know, they need to define what is the problem that they're trying to solve. And as an example, we see that on a daily basis from agencies that will call in. And a lot of times they may request a certain report of a certain amount of data. Now, sometimes that may not solve what they're looking for. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll turn it back around and ask them, okay, what is it you're actually trying to get out of this data? What's the answer you're looking for? Because there's ways to refine this. There's not just a set way that this data has to look when they look at it. Sometimes they think that, well, if they run a particular report or something, what they get is what they get. And it's not that way. There's ways to refine that to make it easier to use, to make it answer more directly that question that you were looking to answer. So there's a lot of data there. There's a lot of ways to get at it. You know, they need to understand what their choices are. You know, how can they get at? What kind of reports can they run? How can they fine tune to make this not just this large amount of data that they're staring at and trying to decide, what am I supposed to do with it? Help them refine that down to usable data sets that'll answer their questions for them.
I like that. And it's never, and I'm not saying that agencies are doing this, but it's never just reporting for reporting's sake, to check a box to say you followed this process, but questioning and diving down more deeply. So Dan, from your standpoint on agency KPI?
Well, I mean, Bruce brings up a great point. Almost every agent that is out in our industry today have data available to them. They have it in their management system. I mean, there is data without saying, gosh, where do I go get the data? Who do I contact? Well, you just need to look in your back door. It's right there. I mean, you have the data. That's a great place to start. How do you leverage that data is the business problem you're trying to solve for, right? You may want to augment some of the data that comes out of your management system with maybe some carrier information, maybe some information that a vendor, you know, like Aaron or myself actually can provide and provide to you. But the data is there today, and there is opportunities for agents today to start using what they have to have a better understanding of what they're trying to, you know, determine or figure out. So,
thanks, Dan. And Aaron, from your standpoint, I know you're all about deep insights into data, metrics and dashboards. And could you talk a little bit more about that and extend the conversation around accessing more of the powerful data they could use?
Yeah, so if I start in its simplest form, we want to provide users with tools that they haven't had before. So one that we've worked a lot on is called a Storefront. It's a digital front end that a producer can brand like under his or her name, or a carrier can brand that way. But the data that comes by solving that problem is precious. So they can figure out which carriers are giving them the most traffic, who's dropping out of their website. They can A/B test their front end for different environments. They can test it by different personas. So if you can solve a problem like with a new product like software, you can bring in a partner that gives you new capabilities. The data around that is typically highly leveraged and highly valuable because it's new, and it helps to lead to literally new work that you can do and benchmark it as opposed to what you've been able to do in the past.
Perfect. So I think we've got into the depths of that part of the discussion. I think we've fleshed it out pretty well. So thank you all for that. We talk about then, or we hear talked about data, not data for data's sake, but the concept maybe of good data versus bad data. What are your opinions on this? I'm really interested to hear your insights on that concept. Or does it just come down to actionable data? Dan, I know you have some thoughts on this.
So Ron, I'll go ahead and grab this one real quick. I think there is a definition for bad data, right? And that's the that's the data that you haven't validated, right? I mean, we can all take information, put it together and say, there we go, that's data. Well, if you haven't validated it and you don't really know if the data is correct, that's bad data, right? So when you really get into it, I think it's important for us when you know what, number one, what you're trying to solve, but number two, where are you getting the information from, right? Make sure that you're getting it from the source of record, make sure that it hasn't been manipulated, and make sure you're grabbing in and validating what you expect. And one of the biggest pieces that we do at AgencyKPI is I work with the carriers and the networks and the agents to validate and say, does this look right? You know, if a carrier is reporting that you have $100,000 worth of production and you know you have $1 million worth of production, something wasn't quite right. So it's always important to take the data and say, does it validate correctly? And testing is critical, right? Validation and testing is critical.
Agreed. So, Aaron, from your standpoint, I know you deal with a ton of data, data lakes, and again, all of the sources and the different reporting metrics, dashboards around that. What are your opinions in that realm?
Yeah, I think from a practical standpoint, the data you can use is highly valuable. And then maybe instead of bad data, I'd say ethical uses of data. But you see, you know, BIPA, biometric data emerging as a challenge. We've had GDPR. There's the security levels of your data, and then there's ultimately the ownership of the data, who owns it. And many people are kind of arm wrestling over who has those rights and entitlements. And I think, you know, ethical, appropriate uses of data are an important consideration right now in the industry and something everybody has to kind of build towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could definitely go down a hard left and a deep path on talking about some of the emerging regulations, what we're seeing, what we're being forced upon us, either agents, carriers, or tech providers, or all three, from some of the state regulations, NAIC, California Online Privacy as models. There's a lot there to talk about, but you mentioned also, you know, custodians of data. Bruce, that's really kind of your wheelhouse as a management system provider. You are kind of the transit and the storehouse of data. So do you look at it from the good data, bad data, ethical data, actionable data, a number of lenses, or is it very clear in your eyes?
Well, there's definitely, from an agency perspective, good and bad data. And a lot of it from us now, you know, currently a lot of their data that they have in their system, probably the big bulk, come in through company downloads. Most of that data is pretty good. It still has to be watched and it still has to be verified, but a lot of that data is good. But there are still amounts of data that is manually entered into the system. And to me, the bad data side of that comes down if they don't have processes in place of, okay, everybody in your agency, when we're entering this particular type of data, this is how we do it. This is our rules. This is how we put it in. That way, when it comes to the back end and we want to compare that data or use it to solve a problem, we know we're comparing apples to apples, because we see that. People will call and they'll say, I know someone mentioned about, you know, your production. Well, the production numbers aren't even coming close. And we find out that things have been entered incorrectly. They're not entering the percentages or different things. And so then we have to spend the time to go through with them and help them put processes in place that everybody across their agency needs to be trained in, so that they're doing things. And that way, then the data turns into good data and can be used and you know, reported upon, you know, for something that can actually solve problems for the agency.
And you touched upon, Bruce, something that's coming up in multiple times as we go through this tech summit, and of course other discussions across the industry on where the data is coming from, what the matchup is, and the function of the data between the carrier, the tech provider, and what the agency is looking for. And yes, I agree that it's all about the processes. And for right now, it's absolutely where we need the wheelhouse we all need to be working in. Let's talk about the future for a second, though, and your vision for like a panacea where agencies have all the data they need, all they could possibly ask for. They understand the data they have, they understand the sources. Everybody has a trust federation, I guess, if you want to put it that way, on the data that's flowing from public and private sources and what's been keyed in, what the carriers are downloading through the management systems for agent use, and obviously the ultimate goal of servicing the policyholder and sales. Do you think the agency, or the industry, excuse me, needs an evolution of some sort to get to the point where all of that can come together? Or is the infrastructure already there and we just all need some kind of kumbaya moment? I guess that's an oversimplification. But Aaron, with DAIS, I know you've always got an eye on the future. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. From our perspective, data syncing across multiple platforms is really what will enable the industry to move forward, and what we've seen in other industries. So as an agency, for example, even as a carrier, you may want an agency management system, a marketing automation system, a CRM system, and you may even want to be syncing your data with your largest account on a two-way basis for intimacy and be able to give them transparency of their overall cost of risk. That syncing will enable us to connect to different industries and really accelerate insights collectively across whoever's involved and give everybody the portability they need. So that's one major milestone that I think we're very close to within the industry.
So yeah, we're seeing a lot more of that openness, that building of the back-end platforms, the trust, and then the interactions using different types of implementations, whether it be APIs, basic data transmission, webhooks, things like that. So I absolutely agree there. Dan, from your agency eye and carrier lens, what do you think about that?
Well, I've watched, I think the evolution of data has definitely changed in my tenure of being in the industry. And Ron, in the last 5 years, I've seen even more changes, right? So 5 years ago, would you have said, hey, would this panacea actually happen? I'd say, well, then they would fill in my bald patches with hair and everything would be perfect. And I would never say anything wrong to my wife and everything would be awesome. Well, the reality is I do think it's coming that way, because I think what's happening is all the folks in our industry are starting to realize the power of data. And I think once they can start using the data and getting something back, right? So it's data is, and Aaron kind of brought it up, who owns the data? Well, there's multiple pieces of the data, and I think we all kind of own it together. And we all have, I think that the partnership starts coming together, and all of a sudden that panacea is going to happen, right? As soon as an agency gets value off communicating the information or providing it, and the carrier in turn does it, and the wholesaler and our whole industry comes together and uses the power of all the information together, I see it coming in the next several years where I think we're going to be in a much better spot.
And I agree with that, Dan, all of you actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is a soft thing to say, less hard and fast with quantifiable information, but it feels like we're at that point. Years ago, everybody was talking about real time. Then it was everybody was talking about mobile. Now it's, for a while now, long enough now, it's been about the conversation's been about data, and we're seeing a lot of that evident in many of the sessions today and within this one, but many of the sessions within the ACT Tech Summit. So I guess as we kind of wrap up, let's leave with a parting shot on your number one recommendation on jump-starting agency use of data. We've started talking about the why. We talked a lot about the what. We're talking about a lot of the how and the future. So let's wrap it up and ask for your parting shot of your number one recommendation on jump-starting agency use of data. Dan, we'll give you the first shot on this.
I'd say you just need to start, right? I think everyone on the call or everyone listening knows that there are opportunities for them to improve their operation, right? Or, this whole start, stop, continue. What are you doing today that you should continue? What is it you should stop with? Well, you have the information at your fingertips. So start getting in and looking at some of the data you have available today. As you start understanding what you have, you're going to understand some of the opportunities for new pieces of information. And that's when you can start reaching out to say, where else can I find the data that I may need to answer the next question? But I think the real jump start is start using the data, even if it's a small training wheels on the bike still to get going. I think that you just need to jump in and start working on it.
Thanks, Dan. Bruce, from you?
Yeah, I think that from the agency standpoint, of course, where I'm coming from, they need to maybe take a step back and look at what they have for data. And that may mean they need to contact their agency management system people to talk to them about what's there, what's available, and, you know, start simply with that, because they don't realize how much they have. They know a lot of information goes in. They see all these downloads coming down. They look through reports and they see all this, but then they kind of forget about it. It's just, so take a step back and look and maybe ask some questions, because I know a lot of, from the agency management standpoint, a lot of the agencies don't understand what they have in their system. They don't understand what's there and what's available. And with that data, you know, as management systems, we don't necessarily provide every single thing. That's where Aaron and Dan and companies like theirs come into play. And because it's getting easier and easier to interact with each other with that data, to,
Yes.
you know, to securely, successfully transfer that, sync it back and forth, they can look for other partners to work with. No one system is going to give them 100% of everything they need. But as it gets easier and more commonplace to share this data back and forth safely and securely, they can, you know, they'll be able to get whatever they need.
I like that, Bruce. And certainly none of this is meant to denigrate agencies in any way or their level of knowledge or ability. This really is advocating for using the full power of what you have and making it a strategic initiative, a roadmap within your agency to plot that out and make sure that you're using what you can. So Aaron, you get the last parting shot on this.
Yeah, my view would be simple. Start with an important goal, such as growing organically. Start with a practical use case like dominating a niche. Showcase your expertise digitally, connect to the rest of the world, and drive leads and submissions, and create wins, you know, that help position your company for growth and sustain kind of viability. But just start with an important, fun, exciting opportunity.
I think that's great and very succinct. Thank you. And I'd add that there's really never been a better time for agencies, small, medium, large, to really use the data to succeed and increase sales. So at this time, we're going to wrap the session, but I want to thank you guys, Dan, Bruce, Aaron. Thank you all for taking time today and sharing your insights and observations. It's been a great session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thanks for having us.
At this point, we're going to wrap the presentation part of this session and turn to taking your questions that you've been submitting using the Q&A function on the bottom of your Zoom screen. So let's go to Q&A. All right. I think we're there. We've got a number of questions that have come in. I'm going to try my best to combine them. We've got about 5-10 minutes for questions here. There was one that just out of the gate, probably top of mind, and it came in a few segments. And I'll ask, I guess, whoever wants to start off with this, if you're applying any ML, machine learning, or AI, artificial intelligence, for predictive analytics, such as growth, value of agency, things like that. Dan, from your end, is that in your wheelhouse?
So it is. We're Ron, we're actually using some machine learning, but not for necessarily that level of analytics. We're using it for more process machine learning. So a lot of agency mapping, subcode mapping, line of business mapping, because a big portion of our platform is comparing, standardizing, if you will, and comparing carrier to carrier, network to network. So a lot of it has around machine learning from that kind of process.
Okay, Aaron, from your end?
Sure. We spend a lot of time on the digital front end
and making sure we understand how people interact with it. So we do things like sentiment analysis, type of natural language processing. And then we've been spending a lot of time on like GPT-3 and actually content creation to go after specific messaging or kind of niches. And it's incredible what you can do with the information. There's a lot of really powerful tools out there today, and we're just scratching the surface.
So this will show that I'm learning things as we go along. GPT-3 could just
yeah, a company called OpenAI. It really trained a model on the entire internet as of November 2019. It has like 17 billion parameters. It's a company that Elon Musk started, and it's really one of the most advanced AI kind of models out there. And it's just mind blowing what you can do with it. The implications for processing, for marketing, for targeting specific kind of content, it's really become trivial to deploy, and it's fun to see it in real life.
Cool. So Bruce, from your standpoint, the management system, the hub of agents workflow, are you looking into AI, machine learning, things like that, from being able to create reporting, dive into the analytics, anything like that?
Definitely. It's definitely things that we're looking into. We probably are not real deep into that at this point yet, but it's what we're looking into. It also looking into other third-party vendors that we can work with and partner with that work with the agencies too, and making sure that if they've got things built before we do that can already do that, that we have the capability to have ways to share data with those. So when our agencies come to us and say they're looking to do these certain things, they heard about this particular vendor that's doing this, we can quickly spin up and be able to share their data with those kind of,
Okay.
work on a one-to-one basis with them.
Great. And I'll stick with you, Bruce, on this one. There's a couple questions that have come in, and they're very much the same, so I'm going to really kind of combine them. I brought up metrics and dashboards. Each of you had kind of touched on that. Are metrics and dashboards to understand the data primarily for the principals and leadership, I assume for strategic planning, or can the front line benefit too? I'm thinking they mean CSRs and producers. Bruce, from your standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a lot of those kind of tools that can be geared toward the management side of things, being able to get a quick picture of how things look within the agency. But I'm sure others, as we do within our system, allow those dashboards to customize what type of data is there. Because there's certain kind of information the management is going to want to look at, and there's certain kind of information that the CSRs, the frontline people that are dealing with everything every day, there's things that they like to see quickly. So they're definitely used on both sides and definitely customizable to what you need, what will help you. There's no reason to have things on the dashboard that really don't help you. So make sure that you customize those to what you need and what helps you, and also look at what all the options are before you do that final customization for yourself too.
Okay. Aaron, from your lens, I know you provide a lot of different insights. How does that reflect to you?
For us, probably the biggest thing that we're seeing is a lot of focus on the quality of application data and then the implications for the business. So application data comes in maybe through optical character recognition, an app is scanned. Maybe the agency keys in the data, or perhaps it comes in through a digital storefront. And then you can see what % of the questions are answered, the quality of them, the iteration on them. And there's implications with that around hit ratio and ultimately loss ratio for carriers. So it's kind of like the fundamental question of insurance, like what are you insuring? What do we understand about it? And we're getting to a point where there's multiple ways to really laser in and converge on better answers than we've had in the past.
Great. And that kind of answers or speaks to another question that I'm kind of combining in, where it's, what kinds of agency data are available that can be used other than by the data owner. So I think that speaks to that very well. Thank you. Dan, from your standpoint, I know AgencyKPI has several verticals when it comes to how agencies and others can use the data. So is it similar for you, where you've got some kind of data that's going to be very powerful and strategic, some that is frontline and can improve actions, can drive process improvement?
Exactly right, Ron. I think we have deliverables that are going to deliver capabilities and a data view, if you will, to the network or broker. we have it then, that same data can then be visualized, if you will, down to the agency, because each one of them have different actions, right? The higher up is going to look more strategically, maybe portfolio analysis, or maybe a producer or CSR is going to be more account driven. So therefore, the data has to tell the story for what they're trying to solve. We're even trying to build the same kind of data views back to a carrier, we'll say, so that you can get all three of them together, but each one of them has a different view of the world, if you will, because they all are in different fish bowls. And it's important that the data is reflected the way that the person needs to see it and utilize it. So that's really kind of the pinpoint of the what's on us, is to make sure that we make the data tell the story that the customer, that the user is looking to solve, versus the story that I think they want to solve.
Perfect. Thank you. So here's a high level question, and this is going to kind of require, I think, all of us getting behind it. And it's not a question what we haven't heard before. I think in closed discussion, how do we as an industry convince the powers to be to implement new types of policy downloads, such as cyber, farm, surety, and other bonds and benefits? This agency is saying that we've been asking for it for years, but haven't seen any growth since inland marine and crime were implemented. So Bruce, from your standpoint, and as management system owner, as someone who's very much involved or invested in process improvement, what do you see as the best way for people to drive that?
What we do with our agencies is when they come directly to us, we don't see that we have a lot of pull by ourselves going and talking, because we are not a customer of the carriers. So we talk with our agencies and let them know, talk to your representatives from the agency, talk to your reps, let them know what you want, let them know what you need. Tell agencies that you see at other meetings, tell them the same thing, because it's all about the numbers. When they get enough volume of people pushing for something, that's what seems to drive it, and it starts getting looked at. We're more than happy to, one of the things we've always done is we've been real open to work with carriers as they're working with new lines of business and new data transfers. We're more than happy to help verify that data as it comes down, that it's correct in that, but we need, the agencies have to be the push in that, because they're the customer of the carrier. So they need to let them know, and let other agencies that they talk to all the time do the same thing, get the numbers.
I agree. Dan, you've got a carrier background, wide carrier background. Do you agree with that?
I completely agree. I think the customer needs to ask for it. The agent needs to, say that this is important to them and this is what they can do with it. The hurdles for the carriers, in my experience, is the data standardized? Is it in a format that can be downloaded, right? So it may seem like it is, but maybe it's a free form kind of database or on a COBOL program that's not downloadable because it's not standardized and they can't pull the features. So there is some work for some carriers that they're going to have to build processes so that those policies could actually be downloaded. Now, if they can be downloaded, then there's another, there's vendors in there. They're going to have to help with the download and normalize the data and then push it off to Bruce at NASA and some of the other management systems. But it all starts by just making it aware that it's a business problem that we need to drive towards, and that there is a value to providing that level of information.
Okay. All right. Aaron, I'll toss this one to you first, and then let Dan and Bruce jump in if they'd like. There was a question that was asked early on. Is there a standardization on data between carriers? Are there carriers that are more open to share because of silos of information, some that are not more open to share because of silos? And I'm asking you particularly because you kind of have a wider point of view.
Yeah, what I would say from our standpoint is that carriers have lacked the technology to be able to properly expose their products to the rest of the world. So standardization makes sense if you have a limited kind of legacy system and it's difficult for you to expose your data.
Right.
What we see is that if a carrier is open about sharing their data with their agencies, for example, and they have well-documented APIs, the standard debate kind of goes away. And most of the policy admin systems were made to process immense volumes of business, push policies through, not talk to the rest of the world. So as the internet is upon us And we are embracing a truly digital product set with the right tech and the right documentation. I think the standardization discussion literally dies.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. We've got time for one more question, and this is a pretty specific question. Bruce, I'm going to toss it back to you as the proprietor, the CEO of a management system. The question is, what are some of the things best practice agencies are looking for or looking at in their management system, such as data like average umbrella limit, count in SIC categories? And this is coming from someone who has a small to mid-size agency. Is there one answer to that, or is that a larger best practices strategic type discussion?
It's really a much larger discussion, I think.
That's what I thought.
Not just one particular answer to that. It's so different from agency to agency. They all deal with, so many of them have their own niche. They have, there's certain lines of business that they've really been successful at. So that's where their niche is. So anything around that line of business, the type of data they need to look at to get into their system, that's what they need to deal with. And then the next agency,
Okay.
So there are, we definitely deal with issues like that with agencies calling and asking those types of questions, and sometimes they get really specific down to granular type of data on a particular type of policy, and we of course try to do what we can at that tiny level, but we also are looking at it from, we want to try to provide as much as we can across the board, no matter what type of policy it is. We are trying to allow them to keep track of all different types of policies within one system and do that in a good way that they can see all that data and use all that. So.
Perfect. All right, at this point, we're going to wrap it. Just so people know that are attending, all of this is being recorded, so it'll be available for playback after the AgTech Summit concludes tomorrow by the end of the week. I want to take this time to thank Aaron Larson of DAIS, Dan Goodwin of AgencyKPI, and Bruce Dickhoff of NASA. Thank you guys for your time so much for today.
Thanks for having us.
All right, everyone. We're going to drop off and end this session. Just hang in there, and you can get back to the AgTech Summit virtual site to access the next session coming at the top of the hour, titled Scaling Your Tech Stack. So we'll see y'all later. Take care.